I want to welcome all of you. Some of you are familiar faces, some of you are familiar names that I can actually put a name with a face, and some of you might be new to this. This is a monthly series that Jewish Earth Alliance and Pennsylvania Power and Light have together on issues relating to climate. We're talking about issues to help people to become advocates. Phyllis Blumberg, and I'm on the board of the Pennsylvania Power and Light, and my trusted colleague and friend of this is Renica Weimer. She can introduce herself and tell us what her job is with Interfaith Power and Light.
Hi, so it's nice to see all of you here tonight. My name is Ranica Weimer, and I am the outreach coordinator for Interfaith or Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light. I'm based in Pittsburgh, and we also now have another coordinator in Philadelphia, which is awesome. I'm usually here to sit on these calls, make sure that everything goes smoothly, and also let you know about any action alerts that Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light has for everybody during a given season. And yeah, that's all I have. It's nice to see you.
Hi. So I'm going to start with a reading, and then we will talk about voting and why voting is so important. I have no other country, even if my land is aflame. Just a word pierces my veins and my soul. With a painful body, with a hungry heart, here is my home. I will not stay silent because my country has changed her face. I will not give up reminding her and sing in her ears until she will open her eyes. So I thought that was appropriate given all the chaos that's going on in the country, all the chaos that's going on relating to forest fires and climate change and flooding and everything else. Our America has certainly changed its face. And to me, every fall and then spring also, but mostly fall elections are just so important, voting and why people need to vote. And I just wanted to say that Bill Nye, of course, the science guy, says the most important thing you can do about climate change isn't recycling, it's voting. Climate change can be fought in the streets, but with protests and rallies, and also at the ballot box. Vote for candidates who prioritize the issues you value in local, state, and federal elections. At the end of the day, your vote shapes policy and not vice versa. We don't want policy to shape our votes. So we'll go over voting in Pennsylvania details at the end, but first I want to turn it over to Maegan Ramirez, who's from the Union of Concerned Scientists, and you can explain how the Union of Concerned Scientists is concerned about democracy and voting and how everything gets pulled together. She is a climate justice organizer, and she works on climate and energy programs. As I said, for Union of Concerned Scientists, we are a small enough group. If you have a question, please ask your question. Don't, you can put your hand up and we can call on you. And then after the presentation, we'll have lots of time for discussion and answering questions. So thank you, Maegan. Thank you, Renica, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Phyllis. Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be here. I will be speaking. I generally, like as Phyllis said, I'm on the climate resilience campaign with the climate and energy program at UCS. So my focus typically tends to be climate resilience and environmental justice. However, today we're going to be talking about voting, how to prep for it, what you can do to inoculate against disinformation. I know that Pennsylvania has I believe, a municipal election that is coming up. And then, of course, 2024 is, in the grand scheme of things, about 5 minutes away. So I'm going to share some resources with you all. And as Phyllis said, voting is always very important. It's especially prescient now that we have a lot of issues that require a lot of care, attention. We have just ended what UCS calls danger season. Danger season, for those who are unfamiliar, is the period of time that UCS designates from May to October, and it's gotten some pickup in social as well as in the press. And the reason why we have named it danger season is because during the hotter months, we have seen an escalation in extreme weather events. ocean temperatures are rising, wildfires are longer, stronger, more devastating, and the fire season is getting longer and longer. We have hit record temperatures this July, and then this September were the hottest. And you know, if voting on issues like that is important to you, here's some ways that you can really mobilize some folks. So that said, I am going to go ahead and just share my screen and let me know if you all can see it. Can you see my screen? Getting some nods. Excellent. Okay. So we're going to start with this. Okay. So as I said, I will be in the beginning focusing on voter registration, mobilization, voter suppression, disinformation, and how you can take action, because we do have some ways in which that is possible. You know, there are always ways to take action. How to do it? You have a menu of options. Hopefully, I'm going to offer you some that are palatable. So moving on. Okay, so voter mobilization. I do believe registration is an important part of this, but I believe Renica will be talking about that, or you all will be having a discussion, let me rephrase, later on after this presentation. So we'll begin with mobilization. Here's what works. And first and foremost, continuing the conversation works. And I'm going to linger on continuing the conversation for a minute. Oftentimes, we all have discussions with folks about politics, state, local, national, what have you. Inevitably, it is the thing that always comes up. And if you find somebody who has the exact same outlook as you and wants to do the exact same things, it is a wonderful conversation. If you are speaking with somebody who feels differently than you, it can be a challenging one. The important thing here, though, is that no matter where either of you stand, where anybody stands, it is important to withhold judgment, to find common ground, find out where the shared values are, and how you can participate in the democratic process. Those are the important things. It's really important to recognize that taking part in your civic duty is something that can be done alongside somebody that you disagree with, just as long as you're very clear about what the issues are that you stand for. So that's the idea. So regardless of who you're talking to, continue the conversation. That's always important. And everybody learns something. We've had variations of this conversation when it comes to things like disinformation and how to speak with folks at dinner parties that you may or may not disagree with. So exact same principles apply. All right. Making a plan to vote is also really important. We can talk about that, and we've got some details to share in a bit, ways to think about that, and tripling the vote. And I know that Phyllis is familiar with that. So if she wants to jump in at any point, she can talk about that. And of course, there is more. And like I said, we're going to be talking about inoculation and disinformation in brief, but it will come up. Okay, so making a plan to vote, what does that entail? Apart from, finding out when the date is and what needs to be done, let's, just get a little bit more granular. So you make a plan to vote and you encourage others to do the same along with you. Typically, if you get folks to do it with you, it becomes a group thing, it becomes a fun thing, and it's a thing that you're in it together, right? People tend to like to do things together, like eating or going to concerts and such. Voting, the exact same thing. How do you make it concrete? Finding out, when it is, how are you going to get there, and what do you need? A lot of people who are first-time voters, and they're first-time voters of all ages, oftentimes don't know what they need to bring when they're there. No shame in that. You just need to find out what it is that you need. That way you get there nice and prepared. You figure out how long it's going to take you, so on. And if you're voting by mail, do you need to request a ballot? And if so, do you know how to do that? When are you going to make time to fill it out? Do you know how you're going to mail it? How long you have to send it in? Are you going to need a stamp? It's kind of like packing a suitcase for a long trip. You think, oh, well, this is really simple until you get there and you realize, oh my God, I forgot my phone charger. So just down the list of things, you know, may all seem very common sense, and it probably is. Nevertheless, making plans with friends is fun. And then tripling the vote. Very, very simple concept that actually has far-reaching ripple effects. So in short, what is tripling the vote? Tripling the vote is getting 3 friends to pledge to vote. If you make plans with 3 friends and you all decide that you're going to vote, that's great. You've already got 4 folks to vote. 4 folks who may or may not have voted anyway, right? Maybe they were already civically engaged. Maybe one or two of those people weren't, and this is their first time. Maybe there's an issue that they are particularly interested and invested in. They want to see this change in their community. You've gotten them to be part of your plan. You have tripled that vote. But if this takes off, then you get them to hopefully get 3 of their friends to vote, and then 3 of their friends to vote. And so it just sort of cascades. And it's, we've got some data on this that at the end I'm happy to share, to email to Phyllis to share data on how that actually works. It's backed up. Making a plan and tripling the vote, they work. So that said, why is making a plan and tripling the vote all the more important now than it's ever been? Some would say because of voter suppression and disinformation. Suppression and disinformation are not new. I think that they tend to seem more apparent because, we have the internet and social media, and things can catch on in a more visible way than probably they had before. So one way that we think about this is, how do we inoculate folks, and what are steps that we can take to make sure that people still make their voices heard and they're still able to see the change that they're voting on, or keep in place structures that have done well for their community, whatever that may be. Making sure that those things do not get marred by suppression and disinformation. Okay, so voter suppression and disinformation. Bad actors, they use disinformation to suppress voter participation and turnout. And disinformation tends to really, really ramp up as election dates get closer. Things tend to go more viral. Things get repeated that aren't necessarily true, but they're really good sound bites. Very, very sly with these things. And bad actors often specifically target Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color to keep them away from the polls. That is also known to be true. And disinformation is often specifically designed to intimidate with false reports of law enforcement presence, immigration enforcement actions, or election monitoring by armed individuals. So a lot of details will get out that aren't necessarily true, that tend to, and let me rephrase this. They are specifically intended to intimidate more vulnerable populations who can and should be voting, and preventing them from doing so. That is the idea. Unfortunately, it has worked, and it can continue to unless folks take action. And so the consequences of this are that the very people that they're trying to prevent from voting are hurt by bad policy. Worse public health and safety outcomes, weaker environmental protections. So the air is dirtier, the water is more polluted, and often inequitable policies, right? I'm not, right now I live in Texas, and a very inequitable policy, for instance, was put into place by Governor Abbott, right? We've got this extreme heat. We've just been dealt a heat dome that was incredibly formidable, but we're going to prevent folks who are outdoor workers from getting their water breaks. If, say, that was something that really bothered you, well, okay, how are we going to make sure that the people that want to vote are voting in their best interests, for instance? All right. So voter suppression and disinformation, and what you can do about it. You can inoculate others before disinformation spreads, regularly amplify correct information from trustworthy sources. And I'm not going to get into the amplification, sharing, or disinformation, or don't sharing. I can't speak because this gets me very, very emotional, because I think about how often well-meaning people accidentally will share disinformation by saying, okay, look at this, and they'll post a link to something that is clearly false. Look at this, this is stupid, this is, I understand that you're trying to highlight that this is a bad actor spreading false information. However, as well-meaning as it is to point out that it's false, you have also just spread that disinformation. It's kind of like seeing a piece of trash on the floor and picking it up and showing it to everybody. That was an example that I had heard once, and I find it to be incredibly apt. Anything that you can do to prevent promoting disinformation, even if the idea is to point it out, just don't. Instead, amplify good information. The antidote to that is to amplify the good rather than magnify the bad. Okay, so right here I've got my blank screen because I want to just go ahead and pause and take a moment really quickly. So that was a lot of information that you all are, I'm guessing this is a rather engaged group. So I don't know that I have shared anything that may be new, but I did want to take a breath and see if anybody had any questions. I'm happy to put my email in the chat because I do have some data that I am happy to share with folks if that is something that you're interested in seeing. We do have some additional resources. And I also wanted to share, let me go ahead and stop my share. I also wanted to share that a deeper dive into voting and training other folks to become more engaged in democracy in this way are coming up from UCS. The resources I just shared are from our Science Network Science Rising initiative. And there are going to be a series of trainings that's coming up in 2024. If that was something that you were interested in participating in, I can go ahead and share that link with you. We have, let me see, why am I not able to do this? This is very, very strange. Forgive me. Here we go. Thank you for your patience while I got that URL. If that was something that any of you are interested in doing, I'm sharing this form with you, and my colleague Melissa Varga will be getting your responses if that's of interest, and you will be kept informed of when these trainings start to take place. And granted, this is going to be happening in a couple of months. Is when they're going to start initiating this, is my understanding. But we also do have an action that I can share with you right now. And it is to help prevent deadly heat from killing outdoor workers, essentially. In a nutshell, that's what it is. It's the Ascension Valdivia Act, Heat Illness and Prevention Act. And if anybody has any questions about that, happy to share that as well. And to answer those questions.
And you really went through a lot of information, and I'm afraid some of us might have missed it. That was a great overview, and I'm wondering if you could just put your slides back one slide at a time and ask if they have questions for each slide now that we've seen your presentation. And we also want to tie in how taking an action like signing a petition on a specific thing relates to democracy, and these are climate related actions.
Sure.
Thanks.
Sure. Okay. So right here, we're going to go through. You all can see my screen, correct? Okay. Excellent. What is happening? The screen that I am seeing is totally black. Please pardon me. There we go. Okay. Now, can you see that? No? Okay. I am so sorry. Here we go. Can you see this now? Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Again, appreciate your patience. Okay. So we're going to go through one by one. And I went through it very, very quickly. And now I am not, for some reason, able to. Here we go.
Before you get to voter registration, I just want to say that the last day to register to vote is October 23rd. And if you have moved and not automatically registered to vote by changing your driver's license, you will be registered to vote in your old place, not in your new place. And if you've moved from out of state, the other state doesn't realize that you're not living there anymore. So you could be counted as a non-voter, but register to vote, last day to register to vote in Pennsylvania is October 23rd.
Thank you.
And maybe Renika and I can talk about, while you're trying to get this, when you're finished with this, on the various ways of voting, and discuss some of the misinformation that people might have about the various ways of voting.
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. So did you want me to just go through slide by slide very slowly? And if somebody had a question, we can.
So why don't you put all of the bullets up for each slide? Great.
There we go.
Thanks.
So that's where we are.
Right. That's great.
Mhm.
Anybody have any questions on what works?
Okay. I'm seeing none. Any questions here?
So you can find out where you can vote by going to the state's website on voting, and it'll tell you where your voting place is. And it'll also, you can also check on the status of your ballot if you applied for an absentee ballot.
Okay.
So has anybody ever tried to get 3 friends to pledge to vote and actually gone with them to vote together? Anybody think that might be 3 people that you don't think necessarily vote on a regular basis? This is considered an off election in that we're not voting for president, we're not voting for senator or governor. If you live in the city of Philadelphia, you're voting for city council and mayor, super important positions to be voting for. What's going on in Pittsburgh, Renika, in terms of elections?
I know we're voting, I believe we're voting for county executive in Allegheny County. And that's honestly mostly what I've been plugged into, because I'm really interested in one of the candidates.
Also district attorney and a lot of judges.
Yeah.
But are
And if anybody has any questions regarding suppression and disinformation, when it comes to more climate things and climate denialism, you know, happy to get more information there with regard to voter suppression. My colleagues in the Center for Science and Democracy are really, really good, and happy to connect you all there so that you can get more thorough info if that was something that anybody here wanted.
So does any of this surprise you, the voter suppression and disinformation that's on the screen? Or have any of you ever experienced any of this personally?
I mean, I personally knew it was happening, but it didn't really happen where my particular town is and where I'm registered to vote. And I'm also I think I was always confused on how this was not illegal. I mean, isn't this seems illegal to have armed individuals monitoring elections? And is there a way that that's something I don't know. I don't want to, divert the attention away from, this crucial topic that we're talking about now, but I just, you know, I'm surprised that there's not something being done to stop that.
I
Anybody?
guess my question is, has it ever actually happened, or people just say it could happen? So it's intimidating, but not true.
Yes.
I don't know.
That's an excellent point, Jean.
It is an excellent point. I'm sorry, continue, Phyllis. I think I cut you off.
No, that's right. So, a lot of times people will say there'll be people from the immigration office there, or there'll be policemen there or whatever. And I know if you live in metropolitan areas like Philadelphia, they have places that you can call if there's a problem. There's statewide places to call. And generally, one party monitors the other party to making sure that everything is done legally. And the people who work actually in the polling places themselves can call anybody. They have numbers if they need to call. I was helping to monitor polling places in the 2020 election in a neighborhood in Philadelphia, and we did have police presence there, but it was not intimidating. The policemen were there for our safety and our help. They sat in their car. They were about 20 feet away from the polling place. They were not directly, on that side of the street. And they just said, if there's a problem, let us know. Here's the telephone number. Just text us immediately. So they were there for protection of everybody, because people were worried. There had been a lot of reports about that. But that's a really good point to be thinking about. Is this true? Is this misinformation? Is this something that is actually happening? And just because the social media shows it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. I mean, somebody could have taken a picture of the police car and the voting place and put them together.
No.
Oh,
it-
I'm so sorry. I was
I'm
just
sorry,
going to say,
continue.
I realized that it said disinformation.
It's fine. It's totally fine. And I realized that I went through the slides very, very quickly because I assumed that much of this was not going to be terribly new. So I didn't want to waste anybody's time. I wanted to leave more room open for the discussion part of it. So that's on me. But yeah, Meg, that was an excellent question. And what Jean's follow-up question and Phyllis's explanation, excellent. Yes. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there is no police or armed individual presence at polling places. There often are, but again, it's a safety measure. It's not there to intimidate voters. It's often presented that way as a way to intimidate and keep folks away. That's, and that for some, and it depends on what the person's motives are when they're sharing this information. If they're sharing this information because they really believe it, and they might actually be scared, or they might actually be afraid for somebody else who intends to vote, and they're afraid for their safety, and they're sharing this bad information in good faith, then it's misinformation. If they're deliberately trying to keep folks away who have a legitimate vote, and then there is disinformation, because the idea is to thwart them from engaging in democracy. They don't want them to turn out, and they deliberately want to plant seeds of fear so that they don't come out and do what they intend to do. So just making sure that there is that distinction. So there is some nuance here. And I see somebody has their hand up. I believe it's Edward.
Yeah,
You froze.
Oh no.
Hmm.
Let me see. I can't see
at
him.
the polls in some areas and not in others. That
Edward,
would happen in
Edward,
Georgia.
frozen. Could you start again, because you froze?
You froze.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm just talking about voter suppression by inconvenience, especially long lines at certain demographics. Like my stepson in Phoenix, Arizona, had to wait in really long lines, whereas probably more red areas did not have those lines, and that was like crazy. And in Atlanta, when that happened, just shutting down polling stations. And there's ways to make voting easier and ways to make it harder. And So anyway, like no early voting, no holidays for elections, that kind of stuff, versus automatic voter registration when you apply for an ID card or a driver's license. There's tons of stuff like that, of course.
So while Edward mentioned the ideas about voting in Pennsylvania, you can vote early by getting an absentee ballot. You can apply for an absentee ballot without any excuses since COVID, and you can vote, you can apply on a continuous basis for getting an absentee ballot. Counties often have voter places where you can drop off your ballot. If you vote more than a week in advance, you can mail in your ballot. And they're all equally safe. If you send anything by US mail, then you can do it that way. You can drop it off at the county places. You can vote in person. So they're all equally safe and effective ways of voting. I personally like to advocate for people voting early because I guess it's because I always think, well, what happens that day? And I read an article about a woman who was actually working for an election very heavily, and then she broke her leg 2 days before the election, by canvassing, by the way. She was in the hospital and couldn't get out of the hospital and couldn't vote because she was planning to work to vote that day. And I just figured, it's kind of like, my mother said to me, handle a piece of paper once and get it out of the way. And it's like, once I get that absentee ballot or that mail-in ballot, I get it, I vote, I know how I'm going to vote, and I'm done. And then the election day happens, and I don't have to worry about, am I going to vote? What happens if I get sick or something happens? So
Right.
it's just, that's my personal preference. All voting methods are safe in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we have it pretty well here. I'd love to see ranked choice voting and open primaries. However, because the primaries are so important, and you don't want to just have to pick between Democrats and Republicans, ideally.
Yeah, I hear that. Thank you, Edward.
That's a long way off.
I don't know if it is. I mean, the Democrats are introducing a bill to open primaries. It's going to give Republican pushback, and we've seen ranked choice voting and more commonly in elections. So
Okay, so Blessing has a comment. She says she can't talk on the mic right now, but she's worked as a majority inspector for 4 years. And if you get a mail-in ballot and don't send it in, or you weren't able to, you can bring it with you to your polling place on election day. You surrender the mail-in ballot, and then you can vote in person. So that's a really good option. So she says, don't sit it out. So you can vote early by voting by mail-in or whatever. But if you never got to it, or if it's like all the places for collecting the ballots are closed and it's too late to mail it in, just take it into the ballot place.
Very
That was
good
an excellent
information.
point.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. So what are the consequences of voter suppression? Well, these things. Public health and safety outcomes, weaker environmental protections, and inequitable policies. Typically happens when the people who would vote in favor of better things are not able to get to their polling place. All right, and I kind of went on a bit of a tangent because I was a bit irked by the amplification bit, because so many well-meaning people do it without intending to, and I think you all saw me get a little frazzled at that bit, but I will pause here. Does anybody have any questions about what to amplify, how to avoid spreading disinformation or misinformation, anything like that?
I'm not sure that I should be admitting this, but I do want to just say that I have been in a situation before where I have amplified things that I probably shouldn't have, that were maybe based off of things that I was personally experiencing. So I think that that's also something that can happen. It's not always just a desire to spread disinformation or not to amplify the correct information, but sometimes it's a matter of you know, if you're emotionally in a certain place and you're distraught, you might do something that, you know, you wouldn't do if you were in a place of clarity.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to put it out there.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much, Meg, for saying that, because I have very much been in the same situation. I have amplified things. It has been an emotional reaction. These things are very personal, but the politics is personal, and sometimes we see things and we react. And the feelings behind it are valid. The reaction is completely understandable. However, any kind of amplification can continue to do further harm. So I think that it's really a matter of striking a balance. And this is just me going a little bit off the cuff and just sharing my experience. How do you see really poor information and then scale back, take care of yourself? Because you need to care for yourself. Sometimes information is bad, it's personal, it targets you, it targets people you care about, it can target how do you then scale back, take care of yourself, and then say, okay, what are we going to do? Am I going to not react either way, or am I going to instead amplify good information? And there, I'm not suggesting that there is a right or wrong way to do it at all. If folks want to completely disengage and it's on social, I will never ever tell anybody that they have to stay on, God forbid, Facebook or anything. Like that's not anything I would ever advocate for. For instance, I don't even know if does anybody use that anymore? Anyway, the point is like, nobody has to spread things on the internet. And if that is a thing that people want to scale back from, that's okay. But in regular conversation and however people do share information, something to think about. How do I share the good stuff? And what process am I going to go through to make sure that the stuff that I'm sharing is good? But I do tend to, it's that tugs, because I've done very much the same and don't want to go too much off on that tangent, but everybody has.
So Bill has been, to be talking about spreading good information, if you go to the chat, Bill has been putting in several links. One is for the Science Rising Union of Concerned Scientists, which is these come from Common Cause, which is a wonderful organization and talking about helping people to vote. So these are good ways of sharing information. We will send you the slides and the chat in a few days, so you can, if you can't copy them tonight, you can get them in the future. And Bill, if you would like to comment on any of these, that would be wonderful, because I know you're a wealth of information.
Yeah, and thank you. I have seen in the chat where you've been putting some links, so thank you for sharing.
Well, Bill may not still be here.
Sorry, yeah, I don't really have much to add. I just did a search for these and added them to the chat. I didn't really do a lot of reading of it yet.
Okay, thanks. Edward, you have a comment or a question?
I wonder if we're going to have time to talk about political activity outside of voting, because there's a lot of it, of course.
Sure, you raised it, you start the conversation.
Well, sure. I mean, one is just getting to know your representatives, especially if you think they may help you. Another one is going to county council, city council meetings, and testifying on things. Another one is getting involved in political advocacy groups, like, say, Conservation Voters America, Penn Environments politically, people that actually get involved in policy. So there's just a lot of ways to engage in this, depending on your goals.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Great.
fun to go testify.
And even going to town hall meetings of your representatives when.
Exactly.
I mean, and then raise a question of an issue that's dear to you and say, what do you think about this? Or state an opinion, or or bring in some facts. Representatives want to hear from us.
They do, exactly. And they have staffs.
Mhm.
And getting involved in political campaigns is a fantastic way to meet other people interested in similar issues and to get to know the people that hopefully will be elected.
Mhm. Great, thank you so much.
Getting on, the other thing is getting on county committee is one of the easiest things to do in the world. A lot of them either don't have any opposition, or the person that's in it already would be happy to step down if somebody else came along. Like Republicans and Democrats all have zillions of these county committee members. There has to be a male and a female in every precinct. So that's a fantastic way to get involved.
Mm-hmm. Great. Any other general questions? And then we want to make sure we allow time for the actions. Okay, why don't we start with Megan's action? She referenced it a little bit earlier. It has to do with the heat, allowing workers who work outside access to protection from the heat and allowing them to drink.
Yes. Yes, protections for workers from extreme heat. And so there's the link there. That is one way to get engaged. Granted, it's not a town hall meeting, but nevertheless, congressional staff does take a look at these, does monitor these. So this is a letter to Congress asking them to, and the wording is a little bit dated because we've just ended danger season. That is from May to October, but nevertheless, they are still taking these. We need Congress to support and pass legislation. Granted, Congress is kind of broken at the moment, but I'm not going to gloss over the fact that we are kind of in a tricky position. Nevertheless, does not hurt to push this. Folks could be dying on the job with killer heat. And unfortunately, things like climate have become partisan issues. We're a nonpartisan organization. I'm not trying to encourage folks to vote one way or the other, or to favor one member or the other, because the truth is that if you are coming from a business standpoint, well, you just got to think about the revenue that's going to be lost if people can't work, and I really, really hate to sound so glib about it, because human life is worth more than the 55.4 billion in earnings that it's going to cost. But nevertheless, I mean, there's the human cost, there's a fiscal cost. Argument can be made either way. And we need to make sure that we're limiting pollution. And we need to make sure that the risk that outdoor workers are facing is lessened, especially as temperatures continue to rise. And we need to make sure that there's some federal protections for them. So long story short, I have this action. Feel free to take it if you would like to, and you can engage in the democratic process right now if you would like to.
So all you have to do is click the link in the chat, populate the information, and then at the bottom it'll say send letter. Done. I mean, that can't be any easier than that, but it's a great start to say I want to get involved in something. So that's right in the chat. And I just did it, and the rest of you can do it if it's something that you want to do. Edward just said, check out Wild Ones Native Plants for sustainable agriculture. Yeah, we've been talking about that. We talked about that, I think, on August. Another very important thing. Do you want to say a thing about this, Edward?
Yeah, sure. Like the way we landscape and garden is an environmental disaster. 5% of total air pollution comes from inefficient gasoline-powered lawn and garden equipment. And there's just no reason why something that's supposed to be beautiful is an environmental disaster. It's just, it's not needed for feeding us or anything like that. So that's why I'm involved with Wild Ones, because we want to get people to move from grass lawns to more interesting, mostly native plant gardens. And we don't want to force people to do it. We want to entice people. And then supporting more sustainable farming is a huge opportunity as well.
That's a wonderful thing to do at the local level, the city level, the township, the municipality, the county level. Get involved. I live in Lower Merion Township, and we have an ordinance that we're trying to pass banning gas leaf blowers.
Oh, really? Well, let's connect then. Like,
Sure.
um,
So, I mean,
my email address in the chat.
yep,
That's exactly what, there's a organization called Quiet Communities,
yes.
that I love.
And
And,
Washington DC has passed it already.
oh, yeah, let's be in communication. And I just put
Sure.
my
I put my
email address in the chat, so please send me an email, anybody that's interested in this stuff.
Okay, thank you. Great
you.
example of connecting climate with action, with democracy actions.
Rollins has wild lawyers that help with this sort of thing.
Okay, Renica, I know you also have an action that you wanted to put forth.
Yes, so PA IPL has an action alert because we are currently circulating a petition. And the purpose of this petition is essentially to hold Biden accountable to some of the climate promises that have been made during his administration and finalize some strong pollution standards. So in the chat, I'm going to drop a link where you can view the text of this petition itself. That'll be a Google document. Yep. And then there's also a Google form that we have that you can use to sign it. So it's pretty easy. You can take a look at the text and see if it's something that you generally agree with and it's something that you would like to sign. We also, slightly unrelated but relevant to us in Pennsylvania, we're doing some engagement surrounding the Farm Bill at PA IPL. And because we are talking about speaking to your representatives and that's come up now during this call, I thought it would be good to just drop a link to our little explainer and action of the Farm Bill in the chat. That's also a Google document that you'll be able to view. But the reason I'm dropping that is because we're still doing some engagement surrounding that. There's still time to talk to your representatives. And it's a script that you can use to call your representatives, contact them in any way, and advocate for things like defending the funding in the Inflation Reduction Act, co-sponsoring the Agricultural Resilience Act, and co-sponsoring the Environmental Quality and Incentives Program. Incentives? Yeah. And you don't have to use this script. The language in it is faith-based because PA IPL is an interfaith organization. But if you are a person of faith, it's a script that you might find helpful in contacting your representative or senators, if that's something you're interested in. In that document, there is a link where you can find your representative. And that's what I have to share with you tonight.
So the Farm Bill is supposed to be passed by the end of this year. We don't have a lot of time left. And it's going to be a major problem if we don't. The Farm Bill affects everybody. It's much more than farmers. We talked about this earlier. It has to do with what foods get subsidized, the SNAP program, which is helping people to eat. It even has to do with school lunches and everything else. It's so enormous. So we have mentioned a whole slew of ways that people can get active today and always on issues that concern democracy, voter suppression, and climate. And they're all, to me, it's connect the dots and we put them all together. And it's our way of saying there's so many ways of getting involved. There's so many ways that you can say, this is the issue that I want to work on, and they all matter, and they're all really important to be doing that. So, any questions or last comments?
Well, I'll make a comment, which is that there's a lot of crap come from the government that's influenced by industry and politics. The food pyramid is complete BS, frankly. It's heavily influenced by the dairy and meat industries, and it's not based on real science. So a lot of greenwashing out there.
Yep. Yeah, the lobbyists in Pennsylvania and elsewhere are everywhere. They say that for every time we contact one of our representatives at the state level or the national level, they've had 20 visits from lobbyists who pay big bucks and who give to campaigns and things of this nature. So that's why we have to be people together acting and our power together.
Appreciate this meeting. It's great. Thanks.
Thank you. Jean? Did you want to speak?
No, I was just agreeing with
Okay,
Edward.
great. Well, thank you all so much. We will have another session like this. Most likely, we're going to be talking about writing letters to the editor in November. It'll be after the election. And then any topics that you would like to talk about, let me know or let IPL know. We have these meetings this Wednesday of every month, and happy to have other speakers or topics or whatever. So I want to thank you all for coming. And have a good voting season. Make a plan, triple your vote. Vote early, but not often.
Be happy to talk about land care sometime.
Thank you all so much.
Thank
Be
you,
well.
Maegan. Thank you, thank you, Renica. And thank you all, the participants. This was a great session. Thank you so much.